And you see this because there are superb legal reporters, right? But they often don't necessarily know the ins and outs of the rap world,
Right.
right?
Right.
Or of like, you know, gang stuff that sometimes is adjacent to the rap world,
Yeah.
right?
Hmm.
They can kind of miss those subtleties, or their audience isn't interested in that stuff. Uh, and you
Well,
have music writers.
I'm sure there's elements of the courtroom reaction and such that you can see things or people that they're just not going to see. Is that?
Yeah. To give you one example from the Diddy trial, I was certainly only the only person who noticed 88 Keys showed up for a couple days,
Oh, okay.
right?
In support of.
Yes, in support of I talked to him, he said, "Hey, I've been doing music with Christian and, that's why I'm here."
Yeah. 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 Interesting. Um, when we talked about the Diddy trial
Mhm.
in our email back and forth before we got started, you sent me a link to a piece about domestic abuse.
Mhm.
And can you tell people why that first and foremost was something you wanted me and love to read?
Yeah, absolutely. So I wrote a piece for Complex about domestic abuse in the context of the Diddy trial, and specifically this concept of coercive control, which is sort of a relatively new term in as these things go. It was sort of codified around 2007, and it explains that like abuse is not most domestic abuse, the majority is not just you hit somebody, right? It is a pattern of behavior to control someone, right? It can be violence, but often violence doesn't happen very much. Violence sort of is the bottom underlaying thing, right? If other stuff doesn't go well, violence is always there, but it doesn't show its face all that often. It can be, financial control. It can be knowing where you are at all times, right? All of these sorts of things can be used to control someone's behavior. So that in totality is abuse. It's not just, oh, the one time the physical abuse sort of pops its head up. And I think that's crucial to understanding Diddy, because Diddy had control over Cassie and over Jane Doe. I don't want to say Jane Doe's name. Your listeners can certainly find out who she is. Um, he used financial coercion. Uh, he used all sorts of methods. Uh, controlling their behavior, who they could talk to, how much time even they could spend in the bathroom, right?
Right.
All of these things. Um,
Well, here's the deal.
and
I have
well,
this. Oh, go on, please, please go on.
I was just going to say that if the question is, well, you know, why didn't she leave? Or, oh, well, he's guilty of abuse, but that's not what he's charged with. Like,
Hmm.
I think looking closely at coercive control gets you to answer a lot of these questions. The link between, because what he was charged with sex trafficking was coercion, right? Coercing these women into these freak offs. And so, coercive control kind of connects the dots between sporadic physical violence and actual coercion, including coercing into, doing what he wants, including these freak offs.
Why did you write it?
I wrote it because I watched this thing day after day, right? And it struck me that it seemed obvious to me that there was coercion involved. This was something, if you read the judge's remarks at sentencing, right? Uh, the judge sort of backs this up. He obviously couldn't change the verdict, right? He couldn't afterwards find, Diddy guilty of anything that the jury didn't find him guilty of. The judge did say there was coercion, and I think there was something to that, right? And so seeing this every day, I just couldn't square the circle between what the jury came up with and what I saw.
Mhm.
And the more coercive control had come up before the trial as a sort of something the prosecution wanted, a theory the prosecution wanted to talk about. They brought in a forensic psychologist to talk about some of these issues.
Mhm.
And so I listened to her during the trial, made a lot of sense. After the trial, I went back, did a deep dive, read sort of the text, the actual book that, gave coercive control its name, talked to a bunch of experts, and it just explained everything for me. It
Mhm.
explained eh, normally I'm suspicious of totalizing theories with good reason, right? But this really made sense. This was like, oh, this is what Diddy did. He did A, B, C, D, right? It, it just sort of set up like, oh, eh, his his excuse was there was abuse, you know, and then there was this other thing,
Mhm.
right? The
Mhm.
freak
Mhm.
offs.
Yeah.
Um, but it really set up, okay, there was this totalizing thing, this totalizing sort of behavior that he did that really sort of controlled these women's lives. And so
Okay.
that it really made sense to me. And so that was why I wrote it.
Well, you're someone I can put this question to, and I don't mean this ask this in a way that diminishes the suffering of people who are literal physical victims of Diddy, but I feel like he was this toxic person who raped hip hop reported repeatedly for decades. And there was a trauma. I really specifically remember being in New York, and it was flush with money when I was there, like 98 to 2001, whatever. And there was always someone who was in fear of Puff, and he was ripping off artists and all this stuff. And I feel like sometimes I watched that the new documentary on Netflix, the one that Curtis Jackson did, and thought, yeah, but um, what might hip hop have been without him? Really, you know what I mean? Is that too big a stretch for you, young man?
I mean, look, I the CCNY game was I was, in my early teens, right? I think I was
Right.
14 when
Yeah.
it happened. So like I wasn't in that world, right? This was something I read about in the newspaper or whatever.
Right.
Um so it's difficult for me to imagine, my first yeah, it's just difficult for me to imagine a sort of world without his influence, which is kind of amazing to think about, right? I will say this trial really made me think about celebrity in a really it made me see the sort of a lot of things about celebrity that I don't know. I almost wish I didn't know.
Tell tell me what you mean. I mean, if you've had a revelation from this thing. I didn't hear. I didn't invite you on to back off from this. What did you realize? I mean, I'm sure you saw some toxic stuff, and maybe how
Yeah, I
people.
mean, it's just that, seeing the people celebrating him there, right? Seeing the people who were there cheering him on, who threw a party after the verdict, um, you know, it sort of got reduced to, oh, there was the one guy spraying baby oil, the one YouTuber. And sure, I was a couple feet away, when that happened. Sure, that did happen. But, that was more or less a comedy skit. That wasn't a celebration exactly.
Right.
But there was a sort of spontaneous party after the verdict right outside the courtroom.
Right.
And there were a lot of people there because it looked for a while like he might walk out that day. between the
Right.
verdict and
Right.
sentencing. There were a few hours where it was uncertain what was going to happen.
Yeah.
And there were a lot of people there waiting to see him.
Yeah.
A lot of people cheering when his family came out and all that kind of stuff. And it just really was like, well, what exactly are you cheering for? Even if you think, the verdict was fine,
Let me
know,
tell you
uh,
something about my people. No, I
right.
just,
I mean, look, look, I was aware of the resonance with the OJ trial, let's say.
yeah,
I would have to have been an idiot to have been there, literally been there and not seen it,
yeah,
right?
right.
I don't think I'm the right person to talk about that in any depth, right?
Yeah,
But
yeah.
certainly it was there.
I'm just saying he's won a lot of BET awards, and
Mhm.
you that's to me always the toxic thing about his whole story, the enablers and all those people who gave him all the awards. They knew his stuff. I don't. I'm maybe you are aware of it, maybe you aren't. But the Reddit page of everything that Diddy did that isn't in the documentary. Some of it's BS, but I've heard a lot of that stuff. I mean, from credible sources over the years.
Mhm.
It's like, he's Trumpian in so many ways. I mean, in terms of, he's done so much dirt that it's hard to you wonder how he got so much work done with all the dirt he was doing.
Well,
You
this
know?
this is this is one of the things about the trial, right? Is like, you know, certainly in the last decade, it seems like all he did was club drugs.
Yeah,
And I'm kind of like, well, how did he run Revolt? How did he run Ciroc if he was just sort of constantly taking ecstasy?
yeah,
I don't, and this is obviously seemed like club drugs started pretty late. They started in his 40s or whatever, but
mm.
so I can't speak to before that, but
Well, I think
it's kind of stunning.
you do have to, like, have time off in between or they don't really function as well. So, I mean,
Mhm,
maybe he's a guy who did 3 days off, 2 days on or something like that.
mhm.
I'm just trying to be logical about it. You've watched, the history of hip hop very well, and I just wonder, well, what did you think of Puffy before the documentary and then after? Did it change you in any way, your perspective on him?
The documentary did not. Just the documentary, largely, I felt like I knew, most of what it said. But also, it was my job, again, to be up on the criminal case. It was my job to at least have a good idea what was going on with all these civil suits
Mhm.
that followed in the wake of Cassie. I don't know all of the, dozens and dozens and dozens of them, but I've read a bunch of them
Right.
and I have a pretty good idea of what they say in the aggregate, of the generally what they say, of what the outliers are. There are many credible sounding ones to me. There
Mhm.
are certainly some crazy ones, right? The tunnels under the houses and all that kind of stuff, right? There are some ones that, to me don't necessarily pass the smell test, but there are
Right.
lots of, dozens and dozens of credible seeming ones that are being litigated. Um, so I don't feel like it was the doc that changed my mind.
It was the trial.
It was the trial. It was just in general the stuff around Cassie, sort of as it came out. Yes, that
Mhm.
was that was a big change. Prior to that, what did I think? I mean, I wasn't particularly interested in him musically. I was a giant, wasn't am a giant big fan, and I feel
Mhm.
like, I was impressed with his acumen of turning someone who, in another lifetime, and if you squint, could have been a, critically beloved but not very well known Brooklyn street rapper into, you know, an icon.
Mhm. Mhm.
That took a lot, uh, and I admired his work ethic, right?
You
I'd
don't
heard stories
you,
from.
you don't have a favorite Bad Boy production.
No, I mean, look, other than, whatever the sort of Ready to Die era, like not particularly, I feel like I admired some stuff about him. I loved that he brought on my guy Pharaoh to write for him, right? And he did that one song where the recorded version actually sounds like Pharaoh, which is I couldn't believe that was the final version of the song.
I don't know which song you're talking about.
Oh my goodness. I'll send it to you later. I forget the name of it.
Yeah.
It has some futuristic thing in the title,
Huh.
but it was one that Farrah wrote for him, and the actual Diddy's recorded vocal is, I don't remember what Farrah said to me about it, so I don't remember, you know, if he said it to me in an interview or privately, so I don't want to, tell
Yeah.
tales out of school, but I think if you listen to it, he's credited on it. It's not a secret.
Mhm.
Um, you can tell very much that it was just kind of like he listened to you know, the demo and went right for it.
Mm. So
This must
what do
have
you think?
been mid or late aughts, I think. It was, not yeah.
Yeah, I would miss that. What do you think of yourself as these days? Are you just a music journalist? Are you a legal reporter? What do you call yourself in the resume that you don't send out? Yeah.
This is a very good question. I wonder about it a lot.
Yeah.
So there was a long time, there was a long period, in the cipher and afterwards, where I very much thought of myself along the lines. Something I stole from Bill Adler was thinking myself of myself as a culture worker, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
in recent years, there has been less of that, and there's been kind of more straight legal reporting.
Right.
But it has been in stuff that intersects with, music and culture and things that I am otherwise interested in.
Yeah.
So it's a good question. I'm sort of in a weird in between spot, and
Okay.
I think I, I don't know. It's interesting. I find myself kind of thriving there, and I think that hopefully I bring something a little different than people on either side of these things can bring.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but I don't know. What would I call myself? It depends on the day, I think.
Okay. Do you have a favorite Christmas hip hop song?
Oh man. Let the Jingle Bells Rock, Sweet Tea.
Okay, that's a good one.
Yeah.
It was better than,
Yeah.
the Hollis Queens one. The guys I went to high school with, they had a hit in 1982, a Christmas rap. I think that's what it was called, actually. So I've been around a regional hit. I'll find it on mixtapes for really super hipster cats sometimes back. Yeah,
Mm,
'cause it's a rare one. But, I asked that as a way of getting into your friend Bill Adler's list. Can you tell
yeah.
us about his list isn't strictly a hip hop list by any stretch, but can you tell people about it?
Sure. So Bill Adler, former, head of publicity at Def Jam in its sort of early years, um, mid 80s up through about 1990 or so, has since gone on to a distinguished career as, gallery owner and writer and, of all sorts of things. Um, he has for many years made a Christmas mix. He has gone out of his way every year to create a, 55-ish minute mix of Christmas music that is not terrible,
Right.
and spends most of the year looking for it. Long before I became aware of it, it became sort of a thing, right? Coverage in newspapers, and he initially sent it out to a small but elite mailing list. As I got to know Bill, I got added to the list, and I ended up having him on the Cypher every year for a number of years to kind of break down his choices for the list, to sort of have an annual excuse to talk to him and, you know, get
Mm.
his choices in the mix and the history of the songs. And there were a few years where I actually got the privilege of being the only place outside of his mailing list it was shared publicly. It was on the Cypher's SoundCloud page.
Wow. Wow, that's nice. Bill
Yeah.
co-wrote with Curtis Blow Christmas rap, right? Didn't he?
No, Bill, he did not, but he actually is the one who introduced me to Rocky Ford, who was one of the co-writers for it.
Oh, okay.
So
Okay.
yeah, Bill
The-
was my to the late Rocky Ford, who, who was, and he and JB Moore were music journalists
Mhm.
who co-wrote, who wrote the song. And, as the story goes, as they'll tell it, you know, Rocky had just started a family. He needed some money. And there was a writer at Billboard, Mickey Addy, who had written like some Christmas song and got royalties every year.
Mhm.
And so they thought, oh, holiday songs, that's a good idea. Let me do a Christmas rap. And they knew Curtis. They had known Russell and had met Curtis, and he became the artist, and added his bit at the end.
Wow.
Um yeah, and that's how history goes.
All right, I just because of my addled brain, I actually had conflated two events, and he wrote that anti-Reagan rap, didn't he? That's what he wrote. Bill.
Yes, I believe he did.
Oh
Yes.
my God, I'd forgotten that. I knew I was aware of it in childhood. I think that's why I'm so impressed by him. He's a name from my very earliest entry, and probably like Diddy was for you. But these people that there just weren't that many recurring names in hip hop journalism or people who were covering the records that I was getting interested in. So yeah, Bill Adler was a
Yeah.
name. Um, do
Yeah.
you
I
have
mean,
you
look,
got?
I will, sorry to interrupt. I will say that one of the things that has been so great about knowing Bill is I remember, 19, I was born in 1977, right? So I remember growing up in suburban New Jersey as a grammar schooler, right? In the mid 80s, coming across Run DMC,
Mm,
right? Coming across the Beastie Boys and thinking like, decades later, oh, the reason it hit me in suburban New Jersey was this guy. He didn't put the tape in my hand, but he's the
yeah,
one who constructed the press that made sure that eventually it made its way, to me. Like it's kind of incredible.
yeah. Now you play, right? What do you play? Oh, you're
Yeah, so
a
I
bassist.
played guitar and bass for many years, less so these days, but that was sort of my pre-music journalism career for many years, was as a musician. Yeah.
Mm. So how did hip hop hit you as someone who was actually playing music as a young person?
Um so
I mean, did you come
what I
directly?
what I will yeah, I mean, I never, other than a brief stint as a bassist in kind of a rap rock band as a young adult, like I never played it, right? It was
Hmm.
something that I could love and enjoy without thinking about how are they doing that? Can I do that? Right?
Right,
This sort of
right,
stuff that
right.
comes along with listening to other kinds of music for me. So it became very quickly, especially once I was actually in music school at Berkeley, it became a lot of my listening because it didn't have that pressure,
What was
right?
coming out with you?
Uh,
What when you were in Berkeley?
uh,
What era?
Gosh, this would have been so I was there 95 to 98.
Huh?
So, you can
Huh.
you can picture that there.
Such a good DJ.
But before that, what I will say is like, the getting to be a middle schooler, right, in the age of MTV Raps, in the age of Public Enemy, I mean, in the age of NWA, like that's so sort of, for me, was world defining, right? And set up my point of view, right? Like
Yeah,
coming
yeah,
coming across Public Enemy, like really sort of set a course for me aesthetically, politically,
uh,
whatever, artistically, uh, that I can still see the influence of. And NWA, like I still remember vividly hearing them for the first time in maybe seventh grade and just not being able to make sense of it. I was like, I know this is a song because it has a part that repeats, so that's got to be the chorus.
right.
But other than that, it came from Mars.
Is I was thinking immediately that you thought it was like the news, you know, because that did have those kinds of characteristics. But you said from
Mhm.
Mars. It's just y- tell me more.
Just like I just didn't quite know how to make sense of it, right? Like even sort of like musically or whatever, like it just didn't fit into other sort of buckets that I had as a, 12-year-old of like what
Right.
songs were.
Right. Very interesting. Um, but it stayed with you politically, but musically, it was always sort of aside from your music, actual music. I don't want to call it real musicianship, but traditional musicianship.
Yeah, it wasn't something I studied and played and like, made music like with other people or whatever. Yeah. Which is funny because it was initially the thing I did that I didn't have to analyze. But
Hmm.
then of course, years later I end up with a job at Rap Genius where my job is of course literally analyzing the stuff. So,
Hmm.
life is funny that way.
Yeah. So we strayed away from the mix. Do you have a favorite bunch of songs that stick with you from your years of? You did it for 5 years. Or I forget how many
It
years.
was a while, yeah. I mean, there's there's so much stuff that Bill put on those mixes, and I almost hear them as a whole at this point, right? They'll put
Right.
them on every holiday and just sort of like, oh, let's play the 2016 one, and then the 2013 one, and then the 2014 one, right? There are certainly individual things. The Prince Buster song, obviously, right? This is sort of the dirty one, the like Recca Poom Poom song to the tune of the Little Drummer Boy, right? Um, just an absolute sort of fun, dirty classic. There's a Yin Yang Twins one that I always really liked because it's sort of like from their later years. So
Wow.
it's them shouting, but it's them shouting about like get the kids out of the yard and all this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Um, so there's
I,
there's sporadic things that pop up, but overall, I think just the mixes as a whole are really,
Mhm.
what stick with me. Oh, and oh my gosh, I am completely going to wreck the name, but there's one sort of very early duo who I first learned about through him, and oh, gosh, I'm not going to remember the name, and I will get back to you on that, but sort of very maybe 20s 30s sort of comic duo um who had a great song on one of his mixes and I got, sort of deep into for a while.
yeah. Now, when I listen to all these, and I'm going to be playing this holiday season, the matter you're talking about. I'll include a link. Maybe you'll do the same if you're listening. But there yeah, it does become this long thing. I fell in love with the song called Blue Holiday. I don't know if you remember that one. That's from
Mhm.
1947. I'm sorry, Blue, I think it's called Blue Holiday, but it's a Charlie Brown song from 47, and then there's a remix in 52 remake in 52 that's just a beautiful version of it, and I think about the volume of stuff he must hear because I think of most Christmas music as being trash. How much stuff he
Mhm.
has to go through to find these gems. You know, I'm assuming you use the internet for this, but it seems very much like an